Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Mjolnir the Movies, and this time we're looking at Conan. Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer, perhaps a bit of Red Sonja. We'll come on to that in a moment. There's a series, Conan the Adventurer, I think it was called, wasn't it?
Mm.
And a cartoon series also called Conan the Adventurer. Has anyone watched this cartoon, by the way?
Not me.
I've seen a couple of episodes actually while babysitting.
All right. So perhaps James will give it a mention, but we won't be dwelling on it too much. But I'm going to come back to Red Sonja first of all, because I want to ask the question, should we actually include it? Because it's not really Conan as such, is it?
Well, it was meant to be a Conan film from the start, but the trouble was that Universal were holding on to the rights for Conan himself. So they got Arnold Schwarzenegger into it, and they had the script, but they couldn't get the Conan brand. Kind of stuffed at that point because
That's right, yeah.
Oh, what was his name? Dino was now working for a new film company, Famous Films. That's right, Famous Films rather than Universal.
Oh, Dino De Laurentiis, you mean?
I'm glad you could pronounce it. I wasn't sure how to say it.
I'm glad someone did.
Well,
My Italian isn't great.
Even I stuttered there, so I say even I stuttered. I always stutter, but anyway.
The price for it was just out of his range for the budget. We'd have eaten too much, so he ended up going with Red Sonja. And because Red Sonja at the time was a sort of growing comic franchise, because that's where Red Sonja really came from, it wasn't really a Howard creation at all. It was still, though, linked to the world, the Hyborian Age. So he could just reinsert Red Sonja in, and you could still have essentially Conan, but as this High Lord instead. Was it Calendar or something like that? The daft name they gave him.
Lord Calendar, yeah.
Yeah, but the character, other than just a couple of lines they obviously changed for the new name, is Conan all the way.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, Sandal Bergman appears as a completely different character, doesn't she? As Queen, whatever her name is.
That's right, yeah.
So
It's got the most obscure start, doesn't it, that movie? It's like a flashback
I was going to say
right at the start of the movie.
beginning.
It's like we get this half-naked woman lying in the woods, and she gets a flashback of something right at the start of the movie, not the end of it or halfway through. It's right at the start, and it's made to force us to assume what's already happened. About $100 million worth of movie. Just imagine we made it.
Exactly. You could get away with that in a TV series, but in this, it's fallen foul of the classic show don't tell. But instead, they literally go through this big exposition dump and force you to listen to this backstory when they could have written it in more cleverly, like they did in the first RoboCop or the first Mad Max that we've covered. This was the absolute opposite, where they did it completely wrong right off the bat. And there was the weird scene they then went into. I mean, they were so desperate to get Conan in or Arnold Schwarzenegger. As soon as they've done the exposition dump, they cut to a very long ride through the land with totally, I can't believe it's not Conan, I'll have to call him, who's riding to what sounds like Western music. And then you look up, of course, it's the same guy that did the spaghetti Westerns, that did the music.
Ennio Morricone.
Yeah. So that explains why the music sounds like it came from a spaghetti Western at the start, because it almost did.
yeah, it's completely out of kilter. The odd thing is that it was directed by Richard Fleischer, who was the same director as Conan the Destroyer. So, although I would suggest that actually Conan the Destroyer is where things start going downhill, but we'll come on to that.
Well, this film suffered from a continuation of the problems that came into that one. We can always talk about it when we're talking about Destroyer.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on the music, because the music was done with for Conan the Destroyer and Conan the Barbarian by Basil Polidoris, who of course we know from our previous podcast from RoboCop.
Mm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, same guy. But he's obviously extremely talented, and I regard the Conan themes as absolutely top notch. It's really first class musical score, up there with the likes of John Williams and Ennio Morricone, although Ennio Morricone was completely out of kilter with the Red Sonja film. Not really his thing at all, and couldn't adapt.
I think
If it
what
was an
happened there
actor,
is
you'd say it was miscast.
it could be just that they made this movie and realized that they hadn't any music for it, so they phoned up Ennio and said, "Listen, have you got any spare tracks from back in your Wild West days?" And he probably just dug some old tape out of the drawer and just sent it to him. Just use that, you can have it.
That although you're probably joking, that actually sounds. Well, that could be what's happened, where he's reworked stuff that it was not used before. Because the Conan riding, the Conan riding moment was so thematically wrong. I would believe that it was actually a second from some cowboy film. He's just dumped in there.
Sounds like it.
Not only that, in that moment, as the credits come up after that opening, you see, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, then Bridget comes after. Is that, wait a minute, isn't the film called Red Sonja?
Yeah.
So you see right away that they wanted this to be Conan so much, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was obviously what was meant to sell it, but they had to, they still gave him top billing, but he couldn't be the main character or the titular character.
Yeah.
Absolute disaster.
Yeah. The thing, coming back to the Western idea, it must be something about Richard Fleischer who's got this thing about Westerns in his head. If you remember Conan the Destroyer, it starts off almost like a Western, where you've got this bunch of riders going across what looks like a very Western backdrop.
The carriage,
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And I thought that, straight away, this is weird. This looks like a Western.
Well, if we're going to touch on Destroyer, the whole problem with it from the start was they were aiming at a younger audience.
Yeah,
that's where that went wrong from day one. And then it turned out, when I looked into it, not only were they aiming for a younger audience to boost the profits, that was their motive. Never a good motive for starters with any kind of art, but they were just aiming to get a lower age rating for it to boost profits. But then, as the film got cut, they recut it and recut it and recut it to get lower and lower age ratings till it got a PG rating from the previous. So it was obviously just hopeless by that point. I mean, the fact that the film's half an hour nearly shorter than the two theatrical releases, the Destroyer's half an hour shorter than the first film. So you can't tell the same story or the same epic story as you could in the first, because you've lost half an hour for starters.
Yeah.
And there was all sorts of material apparently recorded for it that was never shown. There was sex scenes and violence and so on. It was all just kept getting cut out, and exciting animal stunts and things. So you can see why if they had to cut out so much, it would end up flat.
Well, they should really have learnt their lesson with Red Sonja from Conan the Destroyer, because if you look at the profit margins from Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Barbarian made $130 million. Bear in mind, this is in 1982 at the box office. Then Conan the Destroyer only made, was it 30 million? 31 million.
Yeah. On the same budget.
Yeah, exactly. And so they should really have learnt their lesson there, that they were going in the wrong direction. But they didn't.
Yeah.
And of course, Red Sonja was a complete turkey.
And what made Red Sonja even worse was they continued this idea of aiming it for kids, even having the horrendous plucky kid, with the prince character, which with this semi-bumbling servant brought along, completely out of character for the film. But obviously they had to fill it up with family-friendly humour, they thought. But then, I don't know if you noticed, in the scene where you've got the evil queen and asking the conjurer or alchemist, whatever he's meant to be, to do some scrying to spy on the heroes, he brings up a nude dancer for a while on screen. So you've got a supposedly kid-friendly film. They cut out they've cut out the gore and nudity, and then they just flash up a nude dancer. You could see the topless. Isn't it? So you've completely. I don't know how it got such a low rating with a topless belly dancer appearing on the middle of the screen for a good few seconds. But somebody thought, let's have this in a kid-friendly film.
I think that little Chinese guy was supposed to be like a Conan the Barbarian version of Indiana Jones. The funny little sort of Asian kid.
Oh,
who's in there for comic relief.
Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all that nonsense. Like
I think
the Goonies, things like that. You all need this funny little Asian kid in there.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you've got, of course, the weird lesbian rapey queen that's after Red Sonja too.
Yeah. I mean, they're clearly appealing to like teenage boy audiences.
Well, and there's a heavy dose of feminism which gets increasing. I mean, Red Sonja is really sort of very feminist, but it's already there in Conan the Destroyer. So again, that's another decision that's been made. Because in Conan the Barbarian, you've got that strong female lead, Valeria, played by Sandal Bergman, who we've mentioned. Also plays the queen in Red Sonja, but. Valeria, she's a powerful woman, but you don't really notice that she's one, really. You don't get this sort of feminist feel to it. You don't get the feminist vibe to it. But certainly in Conan the Destroyer, I got it more, where you have an overdose of powerful women. And then in Red Sonja, it's just done to the max.
Yeah. It's not even subtle. It just... telegraphs it right to you non-stop, start to finish. And not only that, the other problem with Red Sonja is that the film just was nonsensical. It didn't make any sense. The plot, it was inconsistent. The tone was off. There was all sorts of goofs and things I noticed, and I'm quite sure there's probably a website somewhere pointing out all the continuity goofs, where they've just made mistakes. There's things like the whole fight with Breytag that there was this sort of gatekeeper character who she obviously knows this guy's name and says, "Oh, open up the gate," and then she ends up gutting him, in some nonsensical fight. It just seemed really childishly written.
That's right. It was all slapdash, wasn't it?
Yeah.
One of the brilliant lines that was just kind of madness was where Red Sonja says, "You're not even a woman." Or something like that. And I went, what? What's this? This is crazy.
It also delved into cliches. Rather, I mean, I know obviously you've got a problem with skirting near cliches with something that has been used as a source material so much as the Conan novels, but this one, it indulged in a lot of really bad movie, comic kind of cliches. Even right at the end, you've got the queen dying, who turned out to be a load-bearing queen, because as soon as she dies, the castle starts collapsing for no reason at all.
That's right, yeah, it starts falling to bits.
Yeah, so there you go. It turned out that a queen is actually an architectural must for a castle.
You had that in Conan the Destroyer, but in Conan the Destroyer it was more logical, because it was a wizard's castle.
Yeah, it was an impossible structure.
That's right, it was an impossible structure. It had obviously been held there in the middle of a lake by magic. So, but here it was taken again, but made into complete nonsense.
Yeah, they've amplified all the kind of odd bits of the worst in the Destroyer.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right, yeah.
So, is that all we need to say about Red Sonja?
I think we should move along.
Yeah,
the one redeeming thing about Red Sonja is it's not Kull the Conqueror with Kevin Sorbo.
Oh yeah.
Which, if you were looking for something that makes any of the Conan works look better, that'd be the film to look at.
I'd erased that from my memory. Thanks for reminding me.
almost was yet another Conan film until Arnie refused to do it. And then Sorbo refused to be Conan because he felt he was too good to play a role that somebody else had done. And obviously that's why Sorbo is a household name while Arnie's forgotten.
the great Kevin Sorbo, finest actor of his generation.
Of course.
We'll we'll forget about Red Sonja then now, and we'll forget about Kull the Conqueror. I think as well.
I think we should.
Let's get on to the meat and gravy, which is
The one
TV
everyone
series,
likes.
obviously.
yeah. So yes, I regard Conan the Barbarian as a truly great film, and people dismiss it. People dismiss it a lot, but I think it's wonderfully directed by John Milius, and I shall hold my hands up here. John Milius is Jewish, yes, and he has made a wonderful film and a very right-wing film as well. So
Yeah.
credit where it's due. You see, we're not anti-Semitic on here.
Nope.
And yes, what do you think about the right-wing elements of it then? Because it is very much starting with the Nietzsche quote at the quotation at the very beginning, which some people again might think, oh, that's very cliched, and certainly when I watched it with my ex-girlfriend, she went, oh, that's very cliched, isn't it? And then afterwards, after the film, she went, well, actually, it's not really. It's very cleverly done, because everything comes back to that quotation throughout the film.
Yep.
You know, that which does not kill us makes us stronger.
Is it?
And I think that there are 2 points of reference always in that film that it keeps coming back to, and this is the wonderful thing about the structure, which Conan the Destroyer for me lacks. It comes back to 2 things. One is that quotation, and the other is the goodness of steel.
And also, I would add to that, it's all. I think the film's about willpower, and the reason I say that is because I was thinking about the wheel of pain he's put on, and why he's on it, and why all these other kids are put on it, and why they all seem to die, but he manages to survive. And for some reason, this wheel, this thing that he pushes around for the start of the movie, it doesn't generate anything. It's not digging up oil. So why are they put on it?
Well, Neil,
And I read into it, and they're put on it to have their will broken, and this guy's will never breaks.
I thought maybe it was a mill.
it is. It's but it's a wheel to grind the mill, the wheat. Sorry, isn't it? The grains. Yes. Now then, Neil, which German philosopher mentions the will quite a lot?
I'm not an expert in German philosophy, so I'll have to pass that one back to you. I'm not too sure about that one.
I'll give you a clue. Think about that initial quotation in the film.
Nietzsche.
Yes, there we go. So yeah, this is exactly why that is, and why we have that quotation at the beginning. As I say, everything comes back to Nietzsche's quotation at the beginning. That's something that gives the film structure and a basis for its morality, because it's not very traditional morality at all. It's not Christian morality, certainly. And it also gives it basis for its denouement and so on, and for its progression. I think it's
For the Conan character, but for all the other heroes in it as well.
Yes, exactly. Now the other great thing, as I say, in the beginning, you have the forging of the sword. Well, first of all, you have Mako's little narrative. That I think is very well done. It gives the film, you have an idea of the world that we're going to enter in the film, and it also makes the viewer want to keep watching, because we have the last of the words is high adventure, and we think, oh yes, high adventure, we want some of that. And then
Yep.
and then you have the forging of the sword, and again this again gives the film structure, because we're going to keep coming back to that sword, and we're going to keep coming back to steel. So we have the forging of the sword, and then we have Conan's father giving him the riddle of steel. And all to Basil Polidoris's wonderful theme music, and this brings us right into the film. Absolutely brilliant. For me, this is one of the greatest openings of any film of all time.
Yeah, even though we all know a sword is not forged like that, which is ironic because it's all about the riddle of steel, but you do not pour steel, molten steel, into a sword shape, and it makes a sword. It's quite as easy as
or pour petrol in it while you hammer it.
Yeah, it looks cool though. It does look cool, but that's not how you make a sword.
But of course, the whole I think I don't know if Dave's gets better thoughts. That maybe I'm stepping in his toes, but I don't think what the father was talking about was telling him to trust literally a piece of metal in front, that piece of metal in front of him.
Yes and no.
I think it was more to do with his own ability.
Doesn't the sword shatter at the end of the movie though?
It does, but don't forget he still manages to hack Thulsa Doom's head off with it.
With a sword that's about 400 years old that he found in a cave.
No, he does it with his father's broken sword, doesn't he? If I remember rightly.
But how does the father's sword break though?
No, it's the father's sword is the one that is getting used against him. He's at that point got the sword he found in the tomb.
That's right.
And that's the shock. His father's sword is actually broken. The one that he's obviously remembered and had such attachment to is now gone. And he shattered it with this old sword.
Yeah, so I think that was to show that after all.
Yeah, it's not the steel he's meant to put faith in. That was the mistakes. You know, the Thulsa Doom became obsessed with steel, then he became obsessed with flesh. Well, what he should have focused on was what Conan focused on, which was will. Because will beat the steel, will beat the flesh.
But doesn't he pick up the sword of his father to hack Thulsa Doom's head off?
Yeah, but it's by that point it's like broken in half.
It is broken in half. That's right.
Yeah.
But you've got steel in both senses. You've got steel in the form of the sword, and don't forget that he does a lot of hacking throughout the film. So he wins through violence and through the use of steel. But also it's the steel within himself. The iron will, if you like. His own steeliness. So yeah, you've got two ideas going along there, I suppose. But take your point about the broken sword and so on. I think the broken sword also is this idea that he's stepped out from his father's shadow as well and become his own man, because he's also avenged the death of his father, and in doing so becomes himself, if you like, as a man.
For me, I think it's more the start of the movie is the creation of this sword for his entire life. He drives himself, pushing this wheel, winning in the contests and sort of gladiator pits, going through all these things, even dying and being brought back to life just to get the sword back and kill the person who killed his parents. And at the very first opportunity when they have the sword fight, the sword shatters. So all his whole life has been driven towards that moment, getting that sword back, and he destroys it. And that's a riddle of steel. Like maybe we seek these things like swords and shiny things when, like I said before, I think it's our willpower to get through these things, not our want and desire for something shiny.
Also, at that moment, a stunned silence just let you see the character development. That he wasn't, although he's called Conan the Barbarian, he still had aged and learned stuff over the years. You know, you could see his character change over time from the very crude gladiator, lamentation of the women, etc., to somebody that, especially if you watch the uncut version, you can hear him talk about his youth and the years that went by and what he's maybe missed out on before he then kind of gets back, refocuses back in the battle. It gives you an idea that he is a human. There's some thinking behind that.
Yeah.
It's a very good moment to show that. Also, I mean, people tend to show that famous quote a lot because it is fun, but that's not what he's about. At the end of that film, he's not the same person as he was then, because he was a slave who had known nothing but toil in gladiator pit fights. He's been a free man, and he's now at that point fighting the kind of final battle for his freedom and revenge, and he's thinking back on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
It's also
for me,
that scene is the only scene where you get to hear the genuine voice of Subutai, the actor's voice, because apparently they dubbed the entire film except for that scene.
okay.
I don't know
Do you
why,
notice-
but
You notice as well, though, I'm pretty sure that when the sword shatters, it kind of sounds like glass shattering everywhere. Is this a metaphor for saying the steel is just as strong as glass, but the will never break?
I think it's open to interpretation. It depends on what you're looking at in the symbolism and so on, I suppose.
and I think the fact that we can even have this discussion shows the quality of the film in the first place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And this is what I say. It's far deeper than a lot of people give it credit for.
Mm.
And I think that it's extremely well written. John Milius wrote the script as well, with Oliver Stone, don't forget. And
And it's a quality masculine story without some sort of cliche or cheapness to it.
yeah, that's right. And one of the things as well that it gets criticised for is that it deviates a bit from Robert E. Howard's stories and so on as regards Conan. But Elsprag de Camp was actually brought on as a consultant on the film who actually knew Howard. So it doesn't get... I think that it's well within the spirit of the Conan stories.
I think they... Oh, sorry, Karen.
Even though Conan himself might not look exactly how Robert E. Howard portrayed him, is a smaller man actually in the Conan stories with black hair and so on. They go on about that a lot, but for me, I think that Arnold Schwarzenegger redefined Conan quite well. And Arnold Schwarzenegger also, he gets laughed at quite a lot. I remember Barry Norman once said that he wasn't an actor, he was a special effect. But,
Right. So very nice.
No, that's right. But I think that he's absolutely perfect for the role. And I think that he is quite expressive.
Yeah. In the right role with the right director, he can do good things.
Yeah. There are obviously things that he's not going to be good at or ever good at. But put him in the right place. It's rather like John Wayne. Put him in a Western and everything, and he's perfect. Put him in as that Roman soldier in The Greatest Story Ever Told, and he'll still play John Wayne.
Yeah, when he's Genghis Khan, remember that one?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
It was just awful.
That's right, yeah. The Chinese have built a wall. The hell they have.
with the deviations from the Conan in this film, a lot of it was actually by taking elements from Kull the Conqueror. Including Conan's background in the film is actually Kull's, really. But that's not so bad because it's still Howard's material, so it's still within the spirit of the writer to plunder that as for adventure stories.
Yeah.
And the two had an overlap anyway, because if I remember right, one of the Kull the Conqueror stories was rewritten for a Conan story anyway, so it's something that Howard himself did.
Yeah. And the main thing as well is, like you say, it's in the spirit of the thing, but also it's made a superb film in its own right.
Beautiful too. That's something that can't be overlooked visually.
Yeah, the cinematography is wonderful. And as you've mentioned as well, the script is quotable. What is best in life? as you say, that's become a meme now.
Yeah. You just won't see that for Red Sonja or a lot of other alternatives.
No, that's what I'm saying. And why John Milius wasn't brought in to do Conan the Destroyer, I'll never know.
It would strike me as the sort of film he would really want to do.
I think he did. I think he was taken off. If I remember rightly, he was taken off.
Oh.
it wouldn't have been too much money he was asking for or something like that, because I would do it for free, to be honest with you.
Now I remember there was actually meant to be another film in the series coming out sometime soon. There was another Red Sonja supposed to be coming out, but it got canned because the director it turned out to have yet another sexual assault scandal.
Another one. Oh,
A certain Brian was it Brian
Singer?
That was it. And,
Again.
There's another one that came out just recently. I think end of this year, and it went into the start of this, the start of this year as well. It get thrown out in February or something like that. They've just canned the project. I mean, how many assault or rape accusations does a studio want to handle, I suppose?
Yeah. And he might be Jewish.
Well, if you look at his Wikipedia, it'll tell you what kind of household he was raised in, actually.
Shocking.
Obviously, I can't judge from here, I don't know him personally. I've got to judge people as individuals.
Yeah, we certainly do.
That's right. But it's amazing how often this happens, isn't it?
Just coincidence.
Coincidence.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, and the Conan and Red Sonja are apparently now also owned by different parties, so you'll never get a crossover anymore unless by some miracle.
Would we want one, though, having seen
No.
Red Sonja?
Although the comic fans would. The comic fans are daft for it because it's a whole comic franchise now.
Yeah. I just want Conan the Conqueror, which has been promised for 30 years or more.
Yeah. It's
Do you really want it, though? Because they could really make an absolute balls of it.
It can't be any worse than the reboot.
Oh, it can. They will make it bad.
Well, I'd rather have a go and cock it up than nobody ever has a go.
I just see lots of cheesy one-liners from Arnie, lots of special effects, and lots of obligatory black people.
So Conan 2011, basically.
Yeah. With Arnie in it instead.
They'll put Carl Weathers in, won't they?
Is he still alive?
Yeah. Yeah, as far as I know, anyway.
He must be like 108 by now.
He's only about as old as Arnie, isn't
he? I don't know. Arnie must be late 70s, mid to late 70s.
No, he's just over 70, I think.
Yeah. And there's not many people can keep shape like he can.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, most folk when they get to that age tend to look it, but he's still bigger than most folk that are in their 30s that even do weightlifting.
Yeah, he's still a big guy.
Yeah.
And again, he's somebody who people underestimate for intelligence and so on, but yet he's had an amazing career. Several careers, actually, when you look at him. He's been successful in everything he's done. I mean, to have a character like Conan the Barbarian and to base it all on this idea of the triumph of the will. Oops, did I say triumph of the will? And that's been pretty much Arnold Schwarzenegger's life story. Comes, of course, from a family that was his father was a policeman, shall we say, for a certain regime.
All right, okay.
But anyway, but he's done incredibly well for a guy who was born into an obscure Austrian village near Graz, and has had a career as a bodybuilder, as an actor, and as a politician.
I've never understood where this idea that he's stupid came about. It's just one of these things that you can never explain it. People say Sylvester Stallone's a really dumb guy, but how can he be when he's a multimillionaire who's created so many films and written so many scripts? I mean, Arnie's the same. I mean, what is it about him that made people think he was stupid?
I think they've lumped him in with the kind of meathead archetype.
Yeah, it's this idea, and a very stupid Western idea that comes from this idea of the mind-body split. Something that I do go on about a bit, and Jonathan Bowden went on about it before me. And this is one of the flaws, I think, of Western philosophy, that there is this complete split between the mind and the body, and it's just not true. There are people who are good at both because they concentrate on both, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is obviously concentrated on both aspects, and it actually keeps you very healthy, because if you're healthy in body, that affects the mind, and it keeps the mind healthy. And then if you exercise the mind as well, it helps the body, and so on. You have to be a complete person. You have to be a whole. And I think that a lot of people who just live for the mind in particular, they end up with all sorts of deficiencies mentally, actually, because they don't use the body as it should be used, and so on. So I think that Arnold Schwarzenegger, his example is quite good to Western man in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I know he's done the occasional motivational thing as well. He's done the odd speech on trying to motivate people in general to improve their lives.
Yeah.
It'd be great to see him do an older Conan as king or something. He's still fit enough and he'd look imposing enough on the screen, even at his age, and he's got the age where it would be believable that it's now Conan and he's, more royal days.
Well, this is why I want the Conan the Conqueror film, because essentially he's going to play.
And it has to be Arnie.
Yeah, because essentially he's going to play quite a similar role to what Max von Sydow played in Conan the Barbarian. So King Osric, is it, if I remember rightly?
Yeah.
And
that's right.
he will have to play more of a kingly role and have all those problems associated with rule. And I think that would, if it was done right, would make for an excellent film.
Yeah.
Who would we have as a director, though? Who would be capable of helming something of that magnitude?
Is John Milius still alive?
He's he must be mid-70s by now, surely.
Well,
Is he maybe? When was the last film he made? I'm trying to think of the last film he was really involved with.
You'd need somebody you could trust to get the photography right. Make it look as beautiful as the originals.
Yeah.
Because that was what some of any of the kind of Me Too I can't use that phrase. This wannabe fantasy films that have tried to imitate it. They never get the same beauty or scope.
Well, at least he could do the script writing. Don't forget that this is not a one-off. He wrote the script for Apocalypse Now. He was a writer on that as well. And Magnum Force, the Dirty Harry film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Although, let's face it, I think if somebody ever manages to get a one-hit wonder and it's something of the quality and fame of Conan, I'd still give him the credit for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But as I say, he's not just a one-off guy. He's done all kinds of stuff. He also didn't he do the series Rome as well?
Did he?
Did he do that?
I'm pretty sure he did
the HBO one.
The one that was on about 10 years ago with the Scottish guy, Kevin. Is it Kevin McKidd?
Yeah, the ginger one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Kevin McKidd. Yeah,
that had good writing.
Yeah, I've got it here. Yeah, that's right. He did. Yeah.
It was unusually respectful of the history, obviously with some license, but compared to anything else that's been out there.
Yeah, it was,
there was a genuine attempt to show the morality and sort of logic of the day.
Yeah. So he's pretty good. He knows his stuff. That's 10 years ago. Perhaps he's retired now, but perhaps he can be persuaded to at least do some of the writing on it.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
Maybe a big enough project, returning to an old favourite like that, you could imagine it would persuade somebody out of retirement, especially if you got Arnie or some, confirmed for it too. Might bring in some nostalgia into his decision.
Yeah. I'm going to come on to the writing and direction actually, because as I say, I think that Milius did a fantastic job. The beginning, the sacking of the village, I think is absolutely brilliant, and there are parallels with Sergei Eisenstein's Alexander Nevsky. I don't know if you noticed that. Did anyone notice that?
Nope.
Nope.
You watch the bit in Alexander Nevsky where the Crusader takes off his horned helmet, and then look at the scene where there's Conan and his mother, and the guy goes up to him and he takes off his helmet. Just compare those two scenes and the hairstyle and everything.
Oh.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Bit of a homage.
Yeah, a bit of a homage there. And if you listen as well to Basil Polidoris's theme when they sack the village, and listen to Prokofiev's Battle on the Ice, and you will notice there is it has a very similar vibe with the trumpets and everything, and the and the voices and so on. It's there's a lot of similarity there. So he knows his stuff. He knows his stuff as a cinematographer, as a director, and he harkens back to the tradition that's gone before him. And this makes the film extremely rich.
Well, it's full of stuff like that.
Mm.
And the music is fantastic in general throughout the movie. You can never get the Conan theme out of your head. It comes into your head at least once a week. I sometimes even use it just to like psychologically pump myself out when I go for a jog or whatever. I'll listen to it on my MP3 player.
Yeah, it's classical gym music, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
It's really uplifting, hearty music that makes you excited.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And as I said, this is a film full of memorable scenes. I love the scene as well where he's being chased by the dogs, and and he falls into that tomb, and again going back to the steel, finds the sword, which when he smashes off all the crap on it, is still shiny and new underneath, and he comes up and he smashes off the chain, and all of a sudden the dogs shrink away because he's got the steel.
That's right.
And that's marvelous when he's on top of on top of that pile of stones, and he smashes off the chains. It's a wonderful image, and there's a lot of those sort of images that really get the adrenaline pumping. This is a film that's full of pumping adrenaline throughout.
And the music just keeps up pace with the scenes and how it's meant to be. When you see a decadent scene, the music shifts to something that completely complements it. And same with the stealth scenes with Conan, which is great because that's one of the characteristics of Conan that people forget sometimes. He's actually able to move silently like a cat. That's part of his character. But despite the size of Arnie, he really does a great job acting that. He looks very fluid as he's sneaking. It's believable that he could stealth in there and wipe out these people that he does.
Well, he actually lost a lot of muscle mass for the part,
Oh, God, and he's still huge.
I know he's still huge. Yeah, that's right. But he had to. For one thing, you can't swing swords around like that if you're too muscle bound, because your muscles work against you. This is something that these games people don't tell you. That because I've played rugby and everything, and you could not afford to become a bodybuilder because the muscle would just work against you. So you had to maintain the strength of the bodybuilder, but yet play something like squash or badminton as another form of training, both for the cardiovascular side, but also to keep yourself supple and lithe, so that the muscle was actually useful.
That's right,
yeah. And so this is why Arnie had to lose a lot of the muscle mass.
Well, it's certainly whatever he did, it worked because it's so convincing when you see them. They're painted up with the stripes, and they're either infiltrating the tower with a giant snake, or later on the orgy scene when they're infiltrating there. The movements were fantastic. Obviously, credit to Arnie and the director for both having that, been able to get the vision of the movement in mind and how he should look.
Absolutely.
Because so many, I mean, for a big guy to move like that as well, it must be that much harder, especially if he had to lose muscle, so it's not something he's used to.
That's right, yeah. Another reason he had to lose it was basically to look more like the Robert E. Howard character. Because, as I say, he's not that big a guy in the stories. I think he's about 5'11", if I remember rightly. And, you know, he's not a bodybuilder type, if you like. He looks like a warrior would look like, which is not like a bodybuilder at all. It's like someone who's extremely athletic and so on, but not muscle bound.
Maybe more like a swimmer.
Yeah, probably more like a boxer or something like that. Yeah, swimmer or swimmer would be a good analogy. A boxer would be a good analogy. Someone who, or MMA perhaps, would perhaps be the best to compare him with, because essentially that's where he's going to be.
Yeah, but he was popular at the time, though, wasn't he? He was just when was Terminator made? Was that after?
Yeah, it was afterwards.
Yeah.
No, this was his first real big role, wasn't it? If I remember rightly.
Yeah, apparently got dead cheap as well. It was some sort of salary he was getting rather than the usual hefty fee. I'm not sure if that's just a rumour, and that's why he was so reluctant to come back for another film.
No, that's true. He didn't demand a big salary at all, because don't forget, this was his first really big role. He'd only done something like Pumping Iron. There was this bizarre comedy western thing that he did, I remember, but I can't remember what it's called.
There was that one where he got a minor part riding a chariot or something as well.
Yeah,
I can't remember. Yeah, that was dreadful as well.
That's right. So this was his first real major role. So he's not going to get that much money, but he obviously thought, this is my big break. It doesn't really matter about the money, because if I'm successful in this, then I'll go on to actually do more stuff, and I'll be able to command bigger prices and so on. I mean, he's not going to be short of a bob or two at that time anyway, because he's had this hugely successful bodybuilding career before that.
And of course, what they talk about being small money when working in films is not exactly small money to the rest of us.
No, exactly. He's not going to be doing night shifts anytime soon, I think.
No, you won't see him in McDonald's.
No. Shall we have a little look in comparison with Conan the Destroyer? Because for me, the wheels start to fall off.
Yeah,
it's
one of these ones where you've got that mixed blessing of you really want more of the same for understandable reasons, but then you get it and you're like, oh, you've got to take some of the rough with the smooth there.
Yes, certainly. As I say, my big problem with it is a lack of unity. There is nothing to keep that together. It just sort of, the plot rambles on and doesn't really know where it's going that much. It does sort of know where it's going, but if you like, it's a series of incidents that they're almost MacGuffins to keep the plot
very
going.
Much so. Very much. I think that's down to the half-hour cut, though. I mean, God knows how much footage was cut, but we know it's half an hour shorter, 28 minutes or there, so. But that's enough time to have an enormous amount of plot that could have joined all these various moments up. A few minutes here, a few minutes there, or even a whole branch of the story that could have led on to others. Logically, if I give you Conan the Barbarian, which you think's it's a near perfect film, and told you to cut half an hour out of it, you'd be at great pains to think what to cut, and still have it as a good film.
Yeah,
And then they've essentially done that right off the bat with this.
Yeah, this is the problem with it. Yeah, in Conan the Barbarian, you can't cut anything because everything adds to the unity of the film. In this film, I don't know what was cut, to be quite honest, and would it have made it any better? I'm not sure.
I know some of the actors have come forward, like the evil Queen Sarah Douglas. She said there was sex scenes, there was various sacrificial scenes, to show her. She's obviously talking from her point of view, but there's an awful lot of interaction with her. There was a scene, I think it was a sex scene with Arnie that was cut out. And there was all sorts of things to show, obviously, the evil Queen's shenanigans and her behaviour and her trying to seduce Arnie and so on. So there was a lot of interaction between the characters then and development that must have just been cut right out, which makes them all 2D cutouts. You've now got these characters like the evil Queen would obviously, from her point of view, was much more rounded a character, or at least developed. And they've cut all that out, so you've got this really hollow characters. It quite ends up a shambles compared to the first film. But Roger Ebert really loved it. He says it was fun and silly and much better.
Oh, this is typical of Roger Ebert. How the hell did Roger Ebert ever get a job as a critic? He knows nothing about films. Nothing.
It's almost like whatever he says, do the opposite.
Yeah. The guy's an idiot. He really is, or was anyway.
I think the only memorable thing about the movie is that ridiculous monster with the really cheap cloak that they look like they just ran down to the local Halloween costume shop and bought it for a few quid.
At the end.
Yeah,
Dagos.
I mean,
believe it or not, that's Andre the Giant.
Yeah, that's right. There are actually two wrestlers in the film. Pat Roach is the creature stroke wizard earlier on in the film, and then Andre the Giant is Dagos.
Yeah.
But you would be surprised how many roles Pat Roach has played in films over the years. Yeah.
One of these ones everybody forgets about, but he's been working non-stop.
Yeah, absolutely. So any film where it's needed some big tough guy, Pat Roach has generally got the job. You know the sword swingy guy in Indiana Jones. In fact,
that's right. When Indiana shoots.
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of roles in Indiana Jones where it's called for some big tough guy that's wrestled with Indiana Jones, he generally gets the part. So yeah, he's in an awful lot of stuff.
I'm gonna watch out for him now.
That was other stuff.
Some of the bad guys in Bond as well.
Oh, I suppose it's partly because they could also trust him not to knock out their $1 million actor.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, anybody can be big and swing a punch, but you've got to do it the right way.
That's right. You see, I mean, a wrestler is essentially a bit of an actor. He's perfect for doing stunts, especially during fight scenes and things like that, because that's exactly what they do. Andre the Giant really was extremely powerful. There's a lot of fakery and everything that goes on in wrestling, but Andre the Giant was immensely powerful. He spent the first 18 years of his life as a farmer in France, so, and as I say, suffered from gigantism and everything, but he was an absolute beast of a guy.
Sure, already he could do it like was it 30 cans of beer in a couple of minutes because they were that small in comparison to his mouth.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the size of the guy's hands as well, they're like 4 times as big as a normal man's hands.
There's photos of him standing next to Arnie on the set, and it's like a man and a child almost, even with the size of Arnie.
Well, Arnold's not that tall, actually. I mean, I say he's not that tall. He's 6'2", but you would think he would be bigger, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it gives that impression.
But that's one of the reasons he wasn't considered for the Incredible Hulk. And it went to Lou Ferrigno instead because he was too short for the role.
Huh? Should have just cast shorter actors for everybody else.
Just to come
He's
up
two
here,
inches too short. Just get all the other actors 2 inches shorter.
7'4" he was apparently. 7'4".
Andre.
Andre,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah, that's some size.
Mm.
I'd believe it.
Yeah.
What?
As I say, he suffered from gigantism, so.
So that was something else that was cut from the film, which obviously added to the first film as well. Was a lot of stunts were cut out with the animals. I think that was maybe pandering to some of the complaints in the first film with the animal stunts that were done. You know, things like knocking at the camel and the horses falling over, because a lot of that was done with wire work.
Yeah.
But they filmed it anyway and then cut it out.
But, yeah.
So you've now got spectacular stunts that were obviously planned from the start to be in there. And if you just cut that out of film, you're ruining the pacing and the excitement. You've now got a dead scene where you've lost your big showpiece.
But I remember seeing that scene where he hit the camel.
In the first film.
No, in the second film as well.
He apologises to the camel, but I don't think you see the knockout. Yeah,
no,
but you don't see the knockout.
He apologised to the camel, it spits on him, and then he bashes it over the head, doesn't he?
No, that's the first film.
No,
Yes, that's the first film.
Is it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
No,
yeah. He
no,
lays out the camel.
No, but in the second film, he apologises to the camel when he's riding through the town, but then it spits some milk onto him, or some kind of white goo or whatever, and so then he bashes it over the head with his fist. And I remember that. Was that maybe I've seen a complete director's cut or something like that.
Or maybe the apology scene had it, but I know there was definitely meant to be a scene where the camel before the apology was how it was described to me, and they did it by wires sort of pulling the camel's feet away. Yeah. That's how they get it to sort of fall down and pretend to be unconscious, because obviously they can't actually get Arnie knocking out a camel, but punching it in the head.
And in Conan the Destroyer as well, I remember him knocking out a horse in one of the opening scenes where that bunch of people tried to capture Conan and his fellow thief.
Maybe they added some of these scenes back in for the home, on the DVD and stuff for the TV.
Yeah, you see, I can't remember what
once
I
the
saw
heat's
on television
out,
and what I've seen afterwards now, to be quite honest. So yeah.
Well, it's the same with the first film. I've seen the extended version so much that's the only one I can remember.
I remember what used to be deleted on television as well was the ending with Marco telling us that, basically giving us a preview of what we could expect on this third Conan film that never emerged, and where he was destined to wear the jeweled crown of Aquilonia with a troubled brow and so on. And this story will also be told. And they cut that out because obviously it wasn't going to be told at all at some point.
People were wondering where it went.
Yeah,
but on the upside, you got Kull the Conqueror and Red Sonja, so that's 2 films, so you can't complain.
You feel a bit cheated, wouldn't you?
And then it got re-added back in sometime about 10-15 years ago. So they must have been getting us ready for a third film again, which again about 2 years ago got cancelled. So maybe they'll get rid of that ending again. I don't know.
Oh, it's probably non-stop going round in circles of negotiation.
Yeah.
It's like such a big franchise. They can't just leave it on the shelf forever.
No, well, of course, they didn't leave it on the shelf forever. About 5 years ago, we had that horrible attempt at a reboot.
7 or 8 now, actually.
Is it 7 or 8 now?
2011 it was.
Wow.
Wow. It doesn't feel like it was that long.
Not making you feel old or anything.
Yeah, to any kids out there, time accelerates as you get older, by the way. It doesn't remain constant. This is true. This is something I've discovered, that perceptions of time are very different. When you're young, time seems quite slow, but it accelerates more and more the older you get.
Must be because you
really
get more
does.
to compare it to.
But anyway, after this little digression and my bit of philosophy for the day, yes, what do we reckon to the... I'm not going to influence you by saying terrible, but it is.
Let's think of another word for it then.
Abortion.
Not as good as the first one.
Garbage. Awful. Stinker.
Yes.
What else could we say?
You can play lots of drinking games to it.
Oh, God, do tell.
What do we think to Jason Moomoo cow as Conan?
The guy who plays himself, whether it's Stargate Atlantis, whether it's Conan, whatever it is, well, it's Game of Thrones, he's just the same character, and he looks the same every time.
And I wouldn't want to beer with him because he'd probably bore the arse off me.
Yeah, he hasn't got that sort of charisma, has he? I really want to have a conversation with that guy.
And I think you think that the Conan in the original film was somebody exciting and interesting. I mean, you just knew he'd have a lifetime of stories. But the Moma or Momo, whatever the hell he's called, Jason's one was it did seem just wooden, terrible.
Yeah.
And we've got this whole nonsense backstory with another terrible representation of a village, which is apparently made of mud piled up with sticks, and people dressed in random scraps of fur.
Do you think that this lack of character has anything to do with this Happer background?
You mentioned
I just throw that out there.
Well, there's a question though. In the film, it shows you two non what is he, Pacific Islander or something? I mean,
Hawaii or something.
Yeah. How did somebody that looks like him come from those two parents that you see in the film? I think somebody's been cheating.
Oh.
There's no way the Ron Perlman father character could possibly be the father of that. No. It just doesn't work that way, folks. If your kid comes out with dreadlocks and that colour of skin, and neither you or your wife have that, you get suspicious.
I'd be raising some eyebrows at that.
Again, it's this diversity casting, this blackwashing. To bringing that word that I coined a while ago. It's blackwashing.
Colorblind casting, they sometimes call it.
Yeah, except that it's not, is it? Because it's done deliberately. And it was the same. It was the same with Hercules when they put Dwayne Johnson in the role.
There was a lot of them about in ancient Greece.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's another one actually. He's half black, half Pacific Islander.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But again, you know, diversity, throwing it in there, and it didn't work.
No.
And they're plugging that Jason Moomoo quite a lot, aren't they? Because he's had a lot of plum roles that he's been pretty average in. He's had that role in Game of Thrones. He's now Aquaman. And he's not given a memorable performance, irrespective of his ethnic background, because I think that, you know, there are obviously good actors of different ethnicities and so on. But he's not one of them.
Yeah.
So why does he keep getting these plum roles?
He's just playing
other
the same
than those
thing.
2 films. Naming one other of his movies. Any other movie other than Aquaman, Game of Thrones, and the Conan the Barbarian remake. He's not a well-known guy, and it's for a reason, because he's a crap actor.
Yeah.
That's right.
The other trouble with this film is just how terrible it's written. The photography is absolutely rubbish. I mean, if you watch the first one, then watch this. It's like a tin plate version of it. It's a toy version. It's terrible. The plot's nonsense. You've got the whole collect the 4 MacGuffin things. You know, the most generic possible plot. Oh, the bad guy's got to collect the several pieces of this object. How many times has that been done over?
Well, the recent Avengers / Guardians of the Galaxy film, for example.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same plot.
And to make him into some godlike creature. Yeah, exactly the same. So it's just such a rehash of a rehash of a rehash. And then not only that, the whole thing's keeps contradicting itself. You've got this barbarian village where Conan comes from, and you see the scene where they're supposed the not kids, but the sort of young men are trying to become warriors, and they're running off with the egg, trying not to break it to qualify. They get ambushed by these kind of cannibal-looking wild men who are all quite white-looking, strangely enough. And then, just a coincidence, and the Hapa Conan fights them all off and comes back with the severed heads. But they comes back with the severed heads, and everybody's all shocked, going, "Oh my, the violence!" And I thought, wait a minute, this is a village of barbarians with the big aspiration everybody's to be a warrior. Why would they be shocked at a dead enemy? They should be going, "Yay, he's killed the cannibals." They wouldn't be shocked and covering their mouth in horror.
No, it's ridiculous. That's right.
Yeah, that's the reaction of a very modern person who, naturally enough, tends not to see many severed heads in their life. But in their situation in the setting, as they have explicitly shown it, that kind of warfare and combat's common.
Yep. One of the things is that what they tried to do was to up the violence, more so than in the first Conan film with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that was very much in the spirit of Robert E. Howard.
Yeah.
But yet, it didn't really seem to add anything to it. I think that, in fact, even if Conan the Barbarian, the first one with Arnold Schwarzenegger, had been more violent, it wouldn't have added anything to it, actually. And so it's probably better to avoid some of the gratuitous stuff. Like the thing with the guy's nose, if you remember, where he cut off his nose and then he grabbed him by the hole in the nose and so on. Did that really add anything, or was it
just horror elements and gore for the sake of it?
Yeah, cheap gags.
Right. Even when he went to kill him, there was the implied horror where he shoved the key in and then told people to dig the knife out. Dig the key out with a knife. And that was just a kind of, it's like something that I saw.
Yeah.
And that was just in there, again, for the sake of it, to shock you a bit.
That's right. It was just a bit of titillation, wasn't it? And it
was
didn't
also
really add anything to the whole.
Yeah. And it was a bit that really annoyed me near the start with the father when he gets killed. He's chained to that bucket, and I don't know if you remember, he's chained, and the idea is, if he moves, it'll start tilting back. The bucket will tilt back towards him and pour. And I thought, straight away, if he just runs forward, the bucket will tilt and pour the metal behind him. Yeah. And I went back and looked at it. Yep, the chain's about 6 foot long at least. He could easily stand out the way of it, and instead he slowly tips the bucket onto his head and burns to death to save Conan, instead of just walking at a brisk pace or leaping forward. And then Conan's dad could have been about for the rest of the film. So Conan's dad died not because of the bad guy, but because he was incredibly stupid and deserved to die.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
you're right there.
Yeah, the death of Conan's father in the first film is an entirely different kettle of the fish.
Yeah.
And that is quite gory, although tastefully done, I think, as well. And it does add something to the whole.
And both his parents, it's a moving and heroic death for both of them.
Does his mother die heroically?
Not really. I think
she does stand up for him.
Head cut off.
She does stand up for him, though. I mean, and she only lets her guard down because he starts turning away.
No.
And then she's tricked.
Yeah, you've missed something there. No, he mesmerizes her. I don't know if you saw that, but I
wasn't sure if it was magic or if it was something a bit more human. I wasn't sure about that.
No, he uses mesmerism on her. You notice that with the eyes and everything, and she stretches her neck upwards. Did you notice that bit when she stretches her neck upwards?
Yeah.
Very subtly done.
I thought maybe that was sort of defiance or, an emotional response. I wasn't sure about that.
He's supposed to be hypnotized, and he kind of looks away and to try and distract her attention so he can cut her head off. He's kind of manipulating her. And
because it's the moment he breaks the eye contact, he comes back with the sword.
Well, the thing is, I think what happens there is he looks away to break the magic, stare, trance, hypnotic connection, So she becomes awake for a split second, so she can actually see her own death coming. She's not hypnotized at the moment of death. I think it's a very kind of it's a really cool trick they added in there.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, I never thought of that. Although I'd still give her credit for standing up, even if somebody used magic in her.
Oh yeah,
because he's not human, Tulsa Doom, in this film. We have a scene where he transforms himself into a snake, of course, and also he uses mesmerism on Conan as well in the film when he talks about his father. You know that he is his father now because he's the one who gives him purpose, and so on. Also uses these fake philosophy, this pseudo philosophy. You actually get an extraordinary amount of sort of semi-Marxist philosophy in the film that is at odds with the barbarianism of Conan. If you noticed, fancy words are brought down by the honesty of violence and so on. It's as I say, a very rightist film. The best scene, I think, to illustrate that is the one where you have Conan, who joins this cult, falsely of course, to get into the temple. And there's this obviously homosexual priest character.
He compliments him.
Yes, shall we go where the others do not see? Oh yes.
That's right.
Yeah. And again, you know, talks in this language of nihilism. And don't forget, of course, Nietzsche was always against nihilism, about staring into the void and so on. So it comes back to Nietzschean philosophy here. This is heavily foregrounded in the film. And especially how they brainwash the young and children. Because don't forget that the main part of the plot is that King Osric is sending them out to reclaim his daughter, who's been brainwashed by these people, by this cult of nihilism. And this is the same cult of nihilism, of course, that's come up since the 1960s.
Do you think that was a deliberate thing by the director? Do you think he was making a deliberate connection there? And who the snake people, are they supposed to represent somebody? And was even Earl Jones, James Earl Jones, was he specifically chosen, being black, a black guy? I think he's the only black guy in the movie. Well,
this is there's a lot of interesting. So you've posed a lot of questions there, and
sorry,
but I'm going to try to throw it all together. For a start, James Earl Jones's death was quite controversial at the time, the death scene, in that you had a white guy hacking off a black guy's head. In the film.
There's not many movies about that.
No, that's right, and this is what I say about Milius. You know, fair play to him. You know, he's Jewish, and normally they're antagonistic to us, but he's thrown something in there that goes against the grain, and specifically against the leftist grain. And going back to the thing about snakes, there is a huge dialogue with Christianity as well, in that you have parallels to Christianity, but in some ways Conan is the Nietzschean Antichrist, philosophical Antichrist. In other words, someone who is the opposite of Jesus in his philosophy, because Jesus was passive. You know, this is Nietzsche's criticism of Jesus, in that he preached turning the other cheek. He preached slave morality, as Nietzsche called it. Whereas Conan's the exact opposite. But yet, in the film, you have him, he gets crucified, and he comes back to life. You have the resurrection.
That's right.
And simultaneously, he is up against the serpent. So he's the muscular Jesus character, if you like, but who is also the Nietzschean Antichrist at the same time.
That's right. There is a connection there. See, I never even thought of that. I never thought of that. But now you mention it, I thought there was maybe some kind of hidden message. They were poking fun at a particular cult or religion that was maybe going about at the time. But now I see he is kind of like the muscular Jesus. Instead of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, it's a serpent in another way, I suppose.
Yeah. So, as I say, it's a lot deeper than people give it credit for. It really is. There's a lot of high philosophy in it, and especially with regard to Nietzsche. Milius obviously knows his Nietzsche very, very well.
Yeah.
And it
You wouldn't throw a quote like that out there.
No, that's right. It comes back to that all the time. And Tulsa Doom, when he, when Conan's captured during the film, and he gives him that speech, he's getting Conan to stare into the abyss. And of course, with that homosexual priest character, he's pretending that he stared into the abyss. I've forgotten his words exactly. It's something like, "How do I get to oblivion?" or "Show me how I get to oblivion," or something like that.
Okay.
And so, as I say, there is this heavily Nietzschean discourse within the film, and the reboot has none of that at all, and that's why it's an extremely trite film.
Completely shallow, yeah. Also, even the way it's shot, one of the things I noticed rewatching it and comparing it to the first was how small all the scenes and sets felt. Well, in Conan, the first film, there's a lot of very wide shots. You get this idea of a vast sort of plains around them, huge cities. Everything always feels big. But in this one, everything felt small.
That's right. It's almost as though it was done on the cheap.
Despite all these tools they've got for massive CGI scenes, even the CGI scenes were very tight on them. Like near the end, there's a sort of scene where they ride back home. He rides back home with the girl, and it's so tightly focused on him, and you can see he's just bobbing up and down in one spot in front of a green screen on a fake horse. It's so obvious they're not moving with this CGI thing going behind them, really tightly shot on him, and it looks terrible because of that. A horse riding scene like that should have been a perfect moment for them to really open up and give you a really great landscape shot.
Yeah. In fact, I see it as almost an intermediary between Conan the Destroyer and the series. In that you've got the opposite end of the violence scale, of course, because you have it as quite a gory film, the reboot. So you have the opposite in that respect, because in the series it's very much comical violence almost. It's very family oriented. But
it's only a wee bit worse than Xena.
That's right, yeah. Well, I mean, the series, of course, is in the same vein as the likes of Xena and Hercules: The Legendary Journeys.
But with less lesbians.
Yeah. That's right. And someone who's more muscular than Kevin Sorbo. And perhaps a slightly better actor.
I actually think he was. Going back, I did watch a few episodes. I was actually impressed at the quality. Now, obviously, it's daytime TV suitable for children, so you've got to have a certain expectations for it. But it was actually pretty good. Ralph did a great job in the role, and I think his older age suited the kind of Conan they had, because he was a softer Conan. You think, well, fair enough, maybe 20 years you would mellow out a bit. He wouldn't be the same as the hothead he was shown in especially the first film, where we see his whole arc from childhood. So it actually kind of worked having the older actor because of that reason, having him a bit softer. Well, which obviously was intended for it to be aimed at kids as well.
Well, the thing is that the morality, both of Conan, the film with Jason Moomoo, and the series, they have kind of the same morality, which is not the same morality as Conan the Barbarian, the original. Because, as I say, the original is very much Nietzschean morality. It's very much a pagan morality, whereas the series and the reboot is pretty much Christian morality, or post-Christian morality. It imposes liberal American values on the series, and although you've got different ends of the scale as regards one is for families and the other is for adults, you still have that morality placed on the series. So Conan is very much a good guy, whereas in Conan the Barbarian, the original with Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's neither good nor evil, but he's a hero, and he's, you know, and you're on his side simply because of that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's not exactly an anti-hero either. He's just one of these characters where you just get behind him, and you like what he does, and you like his determination and his strength and his heroism, and like I said, the determination to fulfill his desire to get his sword back and get revenge for the murder of his parents. But I just didn't feel that connection with the remake. I don't really have my heart in it. I didn't feel sorry for Jason Momoa, or Moomoo. Is that his new name now? Moomoo, Jason Moomoo. Have we coined that term? I think we have. But, yeah, but I don't really care if he lived or died or anything like that. It just
No,
No,
the other thing was, well, with the Arnie Conan, was that he had obvious sort of morally grey areas where a lot of his motivation was just greed. You know, you'd see him rob something and he'd overindulge when he was suddenly wealthy. You know, he certainly wasn't a sort of goody two shoes.
no.
No, that's right. I mean, what's the point of that film, the original film? It's a simple revenge story, ultimately. It's not about good or evil in an objective sense. It's a simple revenge story in that he killed my parents, so I want to kill him.
Yeah, because I think we'd all have that desire, wouldn't we, if that happened to us?
That's instinct.
But, yeah.
Yeah. No one's a Christian, really. When it comes
deep
down to it, no one's a Christian, really.
Yeah. Doesn't matter how big the golden crucifix around your neck is.
That's right. So yeah,
Well, the thing about the remake as well is they've not just they've actually made it worse than TV series which predated it, in the sense that Conan's going out with his, I don't know how big army or some force, battling slaver bays and stuff. He's actually now, you know, he's a conqueror for pardon me, anti-slavery and for freedom and for apple pie and whatever else.
Yeah, and he just doesn't.
Well, as you say, the first one was that he was greedy. When Osric asked him to rescue his daughter, what interested him was platefuls of rubies, and then obviously the motivation of revenge.
Yeah, that's right. When he finds out that it's Tulsa Doom, then all of a sudden he's incredibly motivated. So you have that very human motivation, you know, in that, you know, he killed my family, so I want to kill them, and that's it.
There was also some weird stuff with the remake. Well, for one, another reason that the father deserved to die was he hid this ancient artifact of great doom under the floorboard, just sitting, not even like a bit of soil on top, but just under a short, loose floorboard that wasn't even nailed down.
No one will ever find it there.
Yeah, they'll never find it there. Just sat there in a big bright metal casket as well. You know, just to make it really obvious. If he could have just thrown it into a hole somewhere and walked away, but no, he decided to keep it intact, not break it into pieces and scatter it into the sea, not bury it in a hole. He kept it intact in the descendants' village of the guy who was known to have captured it, and he kept it in the one most important building under the short piece of loose floorboard right in the middle of the room. Yep. You know, Conan should be looking back thinking, what a fucking arsehole. I'm glad he's gone. The bad guy saved him from a really stupid upbringing. That's what happened there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the other end of the stupid upbringings or weird upbringings was what was all about with the bad guy in that and the daughter was the bizarre, creepy incest thing that kept coming in and out and in and out in the background. What purpose did that serve in the film other than just ick? Gross.
I think that it's just what the Hollywood's elites are into, really.
It was just weird. It just comes out of nowhere. You think, why was this necessary? To have the daughter hitting the father, and then you see there's a scene later on where they're both sort of dressed in bedclothes in the same bed, and they're disturbed, when something crashes through the ceiling. It's given the implication there's something weird going on.
Yeah, I think it's
clearly unnecessary. They were already evil murderers. You didn't need to add that.
No, that's right. I think they threw it in just to make them seem more evil to the viewer than they already were, but as you say, they didn't really need it. Well, as I say, it has a very stereotypical morality to it, a very liberal post-Christian morality to the film, which is something that the original Conan doesn't have, and why for me it's a classic that rightists can enjoy absolutely thoroughly. One of the wonderful things about the original Conan film is that although you have a diverse cast, you don't get any idea of race mixing, for example. There's no threat of miscegenation, and you don't really notice the fact that his thief friend, I've forgotten his name now.
Subutai.
Yes.
Jerry Lopez, I think was the name. Actor's name. Jerry.
Yeah, that's right. So he's of Mexican descent, and you've obviously got Mako, the Chinese guy. You don't really notice them. It's not foregrounded at all. Whereas in Conan the Destroyer and in the Conan reboot, you have it more foregrounded, I think. This diverse casting and so on. Especially with Grace Jones. There's this sort of threat of miscegenation going on throughout the film.
That was one of the inclusions that the Herbert and his co-fellow professionals praised and saluted, was this inclusion.
Yeah.
She was key to the film, apparently.
I think she plays an awful part. She's so over the top, it's ridiculous.
I thought it was that guy Arsenio Hall in drag. Remember that guy from the 80s?
I do, yes. Coming to America.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. She is ugly, isn't she? She really is.
It's a horrible costume as well.
And she's a horrible person as well.
Detestable person.
Absolutely. I remember that interview with her by Russell Harty, who was also equally detestable. And have a look at that on YouTube. I remember that the first time around, but
oh dear.
So when she says, "Don't you turn your back on me,"
that's right. Where she starts hitting him and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like them to do that, is it?
No.
See, I've only ever seen her on screen. I've never seen these interviews.
But there again, I remember Grace Jones, of course, in the 1980s, who was everywhere. She was ubiquitous. She really was. She even had songs out, albums out, and everything. And she was in one of the James Bond films, I remember. And she seemed in vogue as they were trying to bring in more diversity into films and so on. And this idea of this, outrageous black woman seemed to appeal to the elites at that point. But if you look at things objectively, she was awful. Absolutely awful in pretty much everything she did. And her music career was terrible as well. She really got promoted far above the level of abilities.
Bit like Jason.
Bit like Jason, exactly right, yeah.
And she also seemed to, I mean, I can only remember her in the Bond film in Conan, but it was exactly the same role, the same over the top manner.
Yeah, because that was the role she played in real life as well. So,
Just act like yourself, love.
yeah.
Remember
exactly.
that interview you done? I want you to act like that.
And maybe that's what happens with Jason as well. He's just being himself and getting paid for it. So I suppose it's all right for him.
Have we anything more to add on Conan in general? So I think we're bringing things to a close now, aren't we?
Yeah, I think Grace Jones has brought the conversation to an end.
What a note to end on. What a note to end on. We need something better than that.
Yeah, we need to
do.
end positive now.
I'm going to ask the question: is Conan the Barbarian one of the most rightist films you've seen?
It's got to be in the top 3.
Yeah, it'd be hard to argue against that.
Yeah.
Even though it's directed by a Jew.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. You see, I would put Excalibur above it, but that's probably about all.
I think you're right there. I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one.
And what's the best part about it is its supreme quality.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
It's not a cheap.
It's not
not-
pandering. It's not just done for the sake of something.
Yeah.
That's right. There's no arguing with the quality. And as I say, it's an overlooked gem. It often gets overlooked simply because, I think, of its fantasy genre. And it's one of the things is, I think, that there are a lot of genres that get overlooked because of snobbery. Fantasy is one, horror is another. And it's interesting that both H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, they're very literary, and they both wrote for Weird Tales, which is where they spring from. And they're both men of the right. And people should get to know them a bit better, to realize that there is a culture out there that they're not being taught at school, that is being denigrated by the elite and saying that this is just pulp nonsense. But yet, I think as we've shown it's very rich.
I think so, yeah. That's a much more positive note to leave on than Grace Jones.
I like that.
So really get to know these films and these works of art, these pieces of literature, and I think that you'll be better for it. It shows you that there are moralities beyond what is being taught to you through a lot of the junk that you watch and read nowadays. So, thank you very much to Neil and James.
Thank you.
Subscribe and goodbye.
Yeah. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.